beginning that created the monster. On the cold streets of England, inside narrow prison cells, there was one name that made guards take a step back before opening the door. A name tied to violence, chaos, and the man who spent most of his life behind bars. But he was never just an ordinary prisoner. He became a terrifying legend inside British prisons. Some called him insane. Others believed he was the result of a system that destroyed a small child until he became a monster no one could control. But the truth? The story of Charles Bronson is not just the story of a criminal. It is the story of a man who entered prison because of a simple robbery, then completely lost his mind inside concrete walls, becoming the most dangerous prisoner in all of Britain. Before the world knew him as Charles Bronson, he was only a child named Michael Gordon Peterson, born in 1952 in Luton, inside a family that seemed completely normal. His father worked in a factory, and his mother took care of the house. There were no clear signs that this child would become one of the most feared men inside British prisons. In fact, some people who knew him as a child said he could be calm sometimes, even gentle with animals. But something inside him was different. Anger that could not be explained. Violent energy constantly searching for an explosion. At school, he was never outstanding, and he hated rules. He got into fights constantly, not because he had to, but because he loved the feeling of power. He loved seeing fear in other people's eyes. And over time, he realized something important. Violence brings attention, and people never forget a dangerous man. As a teenager, he slowly became more aggressive, entering the world of illegal street boxing, and he enjoyed hurting his opponents more than winning itself. Even his friends began noticing that Michael did not fight like other young men. He acted as if he wanted to completely destroy the person standing in front of him. Despite all of that, he tried to live a normal life for a short time, worked simple jobs, married young, and even became a father. But inside him, everything was boiling. He could never commit to a stable life. He felt trapped by the world and constantly needed to prove himself through force. Then came the moment that changed everything. In 1974, Michael decided to carry out an armed robbery on a small post office. The crime itself was not massive. The amount of money was extremely small compared to what would happen later. But during the robbery, he used a weapon and terrified the employees, and he was quickly arrested. The court sentenced him to 7 years in prison. Only 7 years. If the story had ended there, he probably would have walked out a few years later and disappeared into society. But for Michael, prison was not punishment. It was the place that created a real monster. From his very first days inside prison, he started causing problems with inmates and guards. He could not tolerate orders. One small word was enough to trigger a bloody explosion, and he possessed a terrifying ability to shift from complete calmness to insane violence within seconds. One day he fought another inmate over a simple game, but the fight ended in a horrifying way. Bronson attacked the man with hysterical violence until guards had to intervene by force. And from that moment, prison authorities realized this man was different from the rest. He loved control, loved being the center of attention, and every time he felt ignored, he would create chaos. As the months passed, his mentality completely changed. He began believing prison was his real world, and that power was the only language anyone understood. Then he started doing something even stranger. He deliberately created trouble just to build a terrifying reputation, attacking guards for no reason, destroying his prison cell, threatening inmates, sometimes even laughing while being transferred in chains after bloody fights. By the late 1970s, his name had become known across multiple British prisons, not as a dangerous criminal because of crimes outside prison, but because of his savage behavior inside. But the point that truly changed everything was when he started taking hostages. In one incident, Bronson became furious at a guard because of a meaningless argument, suddenly attacked him, then grabbed another prisoner and used him as a hostage inside the cell. The standoff lasted for hours, and during it he screamed and threatened anyone who came close. When officers finally stormed the area, they found the cell completely destroyed. The prison administration started realizing that the man was slowly becoming a human bomb. And instead of being released after finishing his sentence, new punishments kept being added because of repeated assaults. Every attack meant extra years. Every problem meant staying longer inside hell. That was when the most dangerous psychological transformation began. Michael no longer wanted freedom. Yes. Over time, he started feeling that the outside world did not suit him at all, and that prison had become the stage where he truly lived, the only place where he felt important. And the more his reputation grew, the more attached he became to the character he had created. During the 1980s, he decided to completely change his name. He chose the name Charles Bronson, inspired by Charles Bronson, the famous American actor known for playing hard and ruthless men. And from there, the legend began. The name Charles Bronson spread among guards and inmates like a warning. Some prisons moved new guards away from him. Others kept him in solitary confinement for long periods out of fear of his violent explosions. But isolation did not calm him down. It made him even crazier. He spent hours talking to himself, training obsessively inside his cell, sometimes covering his body in butter or oil so guards could not grab him during raids. And over time, his confrontations with riot squads became almost routine. He waited for them, waited for the moment the door opened, then launched the attack. Several guards were needed to restrain him every single time, and some walked away seriously injured. But he enjoyed it, feeling as if he were at war against the entire system. In one of the most dangerous incidents, he held a prison guard hostage for long hours, threatening him violently. And when the crisis ended, he said a sentence that shocked everyone. "I love fights. They make me feel alive." That sentence was terrifying because it revealed something important. Bronson was no longer acting only out of anger. He had become addicted to chaos itself. During those years, British newspapers constantly wrote about him. Violent man, uncontrollable prisoner, the most dangerous man in Britain. But strangely, some people actually admired him. Yes, despite everything, he became a bizarre figure that attracted attention because of the way he spoke, his violent presence, and his endless rebellion. He even began painting inside prison, strange and violent artwork, and some of it sold for large amounts of money. But behind that image, there was a much darker truth. Bronson had become a prisoner who would never easily leave. Every year that passed made him more unstable. Every prison cell pushed him deeper into madness, and every confrontation made him more famous. But what nobody knew back then was that the worst days of Charles Bronson were still yet to come, because the following years would witness his most violent incidents ever. Hostage situations, bloody fights, death threats, and the transformation of the man into a real nightmare inside British prisons. And one night, after another bloody fight, Bronson sat alone inside his dark cell, laughing quietly while blood covered his hands. Then he said to the guard watching him from a distance, "You created me." And in that moment, everyone finally understood that the monster standing before them no longer knew the way back.
Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell icon on the channel to receive all the new works.
The man who declared war on prisons inside British prisons. There are unwritten laws. The prisoner knows his limits, and the guard knows how to enforce control. But when Charles Bronson appeared, all of those rules began collapsing because the man did not behave like a prisoner trying to survive, but like a fighter who believed he was in a permanent war against anyone attempting to control him. After years of fights and violence, his name became so terrifying that some guards felt nervous before moving him from one cell to another because he was simply unpredictable. He could remain calm for hours, then within 1 second transform into a storm of violence. During the 1980s, his mental state grew even worse. Long-term solitary confinement slowly destroyed his mind. Imagine spending months, maybe years, inside a narrow concrete room, seeing no one, hearing nothing except metal doors slamming shut. For most people, that alone would destroy their sanity. But for Bronson, it transformed him into something far more dangerous. He trained obsessively inside his cell, thousands of push-ups every day, body weight exercises for hours, until his body became like a fighting machine. And he always said that strength was the only thing he truly owned. But the real problem was not his physical power, it was his mind, because he started enjoying violence itself. One day he entered a simple argument with a prison guard, just a normal discussion about instructions, but suddenly Bronson completely lost control, attacking the guard with horrifying violence, endless punches, headbutts, hysterical screaming echoing through the corridors. It took several men to pull him away, and after they restrained him, he was laughing as if everything that happened was just an entertaining game. From that moment, prison authorities constantly transferred him between prisons. Every prison believed it could control him, and every single time it ended in disaster. But what made his reputation truly terrifying was hostage-taking. He did not do it only to escape, but for psychological control, to force everyone to focus on him. In one of the most famous incidents, he held a guard hostage inside a small room after attacking him without warning, tied him up and began negotiating with the administration in a shocking way. He did not ask for freedom. He did not ask for money. He only wanted to prove that he could control the entire prison whenever he wanted. During the standoff, he spoke with chilling calmness, then suddenly switched to screaming and threatening, making negotiators believe his mental state was completely collapsing. And when officers finally stormed the room, they found the guard terrified, while Bronson sat there smiling as if he had just finished a stage performance. Newspapers exploded with the story. The most dangerous prisoner in Britain strikes again, and with every incident, his fame only grew bigger. Some people started seeing him as a rebel against the system, while others viewed him as a bloodthirsty madman who should be isolated forever. But what nobody understood at the time was that fame itself was feeding Bronson. Every newspaper article, every headline, every expression of fear on a guard's face gave him a feeling of power. And that was when he became disturbingly theatrical. Sometimes he deliberately caused riots just so newspapers would talk about him. He wanted to become a legend inside prison, and he was succeeding. During the 1990s, one of his craziest moments happened. While being transferred inside prison, he suddenly attacked several guards, then barricaded himself inside a room. And when the riot squad arrived, they discovered he had covered his entire body in butter. Yes, butter. So it would be difficult to grab him during the fight. The scene looked like something out of a mad movie. Trained officers trying to restrain a massive man screaming and attacking everyone while his body slipped from their hands. But behind the absurdity of the scene was a terrifying truth. Bronson no longer cared about consequences at all. Every additional punishment meant more years in prison, but he no longer cared about leaving anyway. In one interview, he said a sentence that shocked people. "I'm built for prison. The outside world is not my place." The sentence revealed the scale of the psychological transformation inside him. The man who entered prison because of a small robbery now considered the prison cell his true home. As time passed, prison authorities began using the harshest measures possible with him: extended isolation, constant surveillance, endless transfers. But nothing worked. Sometimes isolation only made him more aggressive. He talked to himself for hours, wrote strange letters, painted artworks filled with violence and distorted faces, as if he lived inside a completely separate reality. Yet despite all the madness, he possessed a strange intelligence. He knew how to psychologically control situations, knew how to frighten guards, how to make the press talk about him, even how to turn himself into a symbol. During that period, he started receiving letters from fans. People outside prison saw him as a rebellious figure against the system. Some believed he was a victim of brutal prisons. Others were simply fascinated by the violence and chaos surrounding him. And all that attention made him more arrogant. He began acting like a celebrity, not a prisoner, but behind all that fame, there were deeply horrifying moments. In one violent incident, he assaulted a guard so brutally that the attack nearly killed him. The beating was so savage that prison authorities seriously considered isolating him for the rest of his life. And that was when questions began spreading across Britain. Was Charles Bronson simply a violent criminal? Or did the prison system itself transform him into this monster? Because the shocking truth was that most of his major crimes happened inside prison, not outside. Every year spent there made him worse, and every attempt to control him pushed him closer to explosion. But the worst had still not happened, because Bronson was about to carry out the most dangerous hostage situation of his life, an incident that would place his name across every headline in Britain and show the entire world how far this man had descended into madness. An incident after which investigators and guards would say only one sentence: "This man is impossible to predict." And one cold night inside his cell, Bronson trained alone as usual, sweat covering his body, silence filling the place. Then suddenly he stopped, stared at the wall, and smiled a terrifying smile, because he was planning something far bigger. Something that would throw the entire British prison system into full emergency mode. The horror legend that consumed itself. By the end of the 1990s, the name Charles Bronson had transformed from merely a violent prisoner into a living nightmare across Britain. Guards exchanged stories about him as warnings. Inmates avoided provoking him by a shuckle, and even prison authorities themselves began treating him as a problem with no possible solution. But Bronson was not finished yet, because he was about to carry out the most dangerous incident of his entire life. In 1999, inside one of Britain's highest security prisons, there was an art teacher working with inmates in painting workshops. A calm man with no connection to violence. He entered as usual to give his lesson, but within minutes, he would find himself inside a real hell. Suddenly, everything changed. Bronson attacked the teacher without warning, completely overpowered him, then tied him up using ropes and wires inside the room. After that, he barricaded the area as if preparing for war. But what made the incident truly horrifying was that he was not angry. He was enjoying himself. He moved with confidence and calmness, as if directing a movie scene. And when authorities attempted to negotiate with him, he began making terrifying threats and bizarre demands. One moment he wanted a helicopter, another moment combat equipment, and sometimes he simply demanded a cup of tea while laughing. Hours passed slowly. Almost all of Britain started hearing about what was happening. Newspapers and television channels talked about the most dangerous man inside British prisons. As for the hostage, he was living through the worst moments of his life. Bronson began painting on his own body, screaming, sometimes singing, then suddenly switching back to threats and violence, as if multiple personalities were moving inside him. Outside, tactical assault teams prepared themselves. Everyone understood that one mistake could end with a corpse. Then after a long siege, special forces decided to end it. The raid was violent and fast. Explosions, screaming, hand-to-hand fighting, and several officers trying to restrain Bronson while he resisted with complete madness. But eventually, he fell to the ground in chains, and the teacher survived. Yet the incident became a massive turning point, because it confirmed to everyone that Charles Bronson was no longer simply a dangerous prisoner, but a man who lived on chaos itself, a man who needed fear around him in order to feel alive. After the incident, his isolation was intensified beyond anything before. Single-cell confinement, permanent monitoring, extreme restrictions, and sometimes he was even denied normal communication with others. But that prolonged isolation created something even stranger. Bronson slowly transformed into an almost mythical figure in British media. Newspapers constantly published stories about him, documentaries discussed him, and people became strangely divided about him. Some saw him as a madman who destroyed his own life. Others believed British prisons had turned him into a monster after burying him for decades inside concrete walls. But the most dangerous thing was that Bronson himself began believing the legend. He started speaking about himself as if he were a superhuman figure, writing books, painting artwork, sending letters filled with strange and violent language. Some of his paintings were even sold outside prison. A man who spent most of his life inside a cell, yet somehow became famous around the entire world. Then in 2008 came the moment that exploded his fame globally. The release of the movie Bronson, starring Tom Hardy. The film did not portray him as an ordinary criminal, but as a bizarre, chaotic figure, violent, sometimes funny, and terrifying all the time. And Tom Hardy's performance was so shocking that many considered the film one of the greatest psychological crime movies ever made. Suddenly, Charles Bronson became an icon within crime culture. His image spread everywhere. His quotes became famous. Even young people online started sharing his story as if he were a fictional character. But the truth behind all that fame was far sadder, because in the end, Bronson lost his entire life. Dozens of years disappeared inside prison cells. His human relationships collapsed. His mind changed forever. And the man who entered prison because of a simple robbery ended up becoming a legend of violence that even Britain itself could never fully understand. In recent years, he sometimes appeared slightly different, sometimes speaking about regret, sometimes saying he wanted peace, then later returning once again to aggressive behavior, as if the war inside him had never truly ended. And in one of his letters, he wrote a sentence that summarized his entire life. Prison created a man who cannot live outside it. And perhaps that was the terrifying truth behind the story of Charles Bronson. That Britain's most dangerous prisoner